We're ready for the start. They're off.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to It's Official, the weekly banner show from First Bet and Express Bet, where Jeff Siegel, my partner, and me, Jeremy Plonk, we go through 5 hot topics each week in thoroughbred racing. We even had some standardbred racing last week, Jeff, with the Hambletonian. Big bombs in the Hambletonian. It was like the Kentucky Derby blew up again on the harness side, but we'll stick to the thoroughbreds, what we know best, as we talk about this week's racing, and It's Official.
And we had some very good racing last week, and life is good. He held up his end of the bargain, so to speak. We're looking forward to Flightline doing the same in his next start. That'll be next month in the Pacific Classic. Yep. Hoping that both get to the Breeders' Cup in peak form, and then we'll have a real heavyweight fight there and maybe a race for the ages. But some upsets as well. Some horses that I didn't think would or could lose did. And that's kind of par for the course. The Euros came over and did what they usually do. And we got a commentary about the timing situation here in North America, which has been, about a 3-decade slump, I would say right now. And hopefully someone picks up the initiative and decides to fix it. But we'll talk about that later. And a star of the future, a really good colt, not surprisingly by Gun Runner. We were due for one of those, and we'll talk about him as well. But life is good. He did what he was supposed to do.
And he's the top of our big board. Life in the Fast Lane is you're going to see a musical theme this week on It's Official. Life in the Fast Lane was indeed in the Whitney Stakes. Let's go back to Saratoga on Saturday and see Life is Good register another Grade 1.
And it is Life is Good, the leader. Hot Rod Charlie now makes his run at the outside of Life is Good. So it's Life is Good, Hot Rod Charlie. Happy Saver has come through down on the inside. And Olympiad is next. And then moving for the 8th pole. Down on the inside, it is Happy Saver trying to get to Life is Good. Life is Good now moves down to the inside. Happy Saver had a veer there. And then it is Hot Rod Charlie. And they're coming for the finish. It is Life is Good still in front. Life is Good is the winner by 2 lengths. Then Happy Saver and Hot Rod Charlie.
Jeff, we knew he was a Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner last year. He stretched out to win the Pegasus in 1 1/8, and he did it again. Life is Good has got a reputation as a cruel dude, as the song went, Life in the Fast Lane. Up to 1 1/8, he's cruel, all right.
Well, that might be his limit or maybe not. I mean, he didn't get 1 1/4 in Dubai, and he got 1 1/8 here. And I love the aggressiveness that they weren't going to raid him or do anything like that. I always say if a horse has got a weapon, you better use it. And in Life is Good's case, he's not sitting second to anybody. He was able to get over from his outside draw and get to the rail before they hit the first turn. Set legitimate fractions, always going well. Looked like he was going to be challenged. In fact, was challenged at the head of the lane. But Life is Good, and we see this in his races. We see this in his workouts. Just when you think maybe he's going to empty out, he finds that second move, Right. He was able to draw clear and win convincingly. He's going to have one more race now, probably before the Breeders' Cup, and then that'll be it. But he did cause some controversy. That is, he and his rider, obviously Irad Ortiz, coming over a little bit on Happy Saver. And
a little bit.
Well, it was more than a little bit. Although I will say this, Johnny Velasquez. They asked Johnny Velasquez, who rode the second horse, Happy Saver, if he was fouled in any way, and he said, "Nah, that was 2 lengths in front of me. There was no excuse. I'm not." He did have to angle out. I think it was a good thing though that Happy Saver managed to finish second. Otherwise, if he'd blown second, there really would have been a controversy. Correct. But Happy Saver, in his own mind, thinking, "I always finish second. Might as well keep that streak alive." So he managed to hold off Hot Rod Charlie, and Life is Good continued on. But I don't know. I think he may have done something that was race riding, but he didn't have to do it. He really, pushes the envelope sometimes.
Well, that's the thing, is it was race riding, but it was unnecessary. Like you said, he didn't need to do it in this particular sense. But you see him obviously look back over his left shoulder. You see it. You see the hands. You see the motion. It's obviously an intent move to close the door, but they're already on the straight. It's not like coming off the turn and you're trying to close the door on a horse rallying up. He had that horse beat and put away. Just unnecessary. And he tends to do this stuff over and over. at some point, something bad's going to happen on one of these moves. And that's where everybody's going to throw their hands up in the air. And the people who have been kind of seeing it for a while will say, well, this is what we've been telling you. He is hyper aggressive in the saddle. There's no question about that. If you're gambling and he's your rider, he's giving you every opportunity to win a race. There's no question about it. So as a bettor and as a horse player, I'm not disrespecting Irad Ortiz whatsoever, because I want somebody who life and limb wants to get to the wire for me on top. But the other riders in there, that's where it gets dicey. And for the, and if I've got Irad, it's great if I'm on him. But if I'm not on him and I'm on Happy Saver and he happened to get beat for second and my exacta goes down the tubes in that race, then I would have been very upset. So they've let this go, and like you said, with 30-year slumps and fixing some problems in racing, this one isn't 30 years, but it's gone on a couple years now. Irad has been given license to ride like this, so he's going to continue to ride like this as long as he has license to do so. It's going to take somebody stepping in and saying, you can't do this anymore in order for it not to be ridden that way. This wasn't a dangerous situation at all, but it was not necessary either, and I think I'm getting deja vu here. I almost feel like we had this exact same conversation in one of our videos or in our audio podcast earlier this year. It was one of those where it wasn't necessary, it's not right, but it didn't hurt anybody, at least in this particular instance.
Right. The other thing that I thought about at the time was, regardless of whether it was careless or not, I don't think he would have done it unless he felt a little bit of a fear factor that maybe he wasn't going to beat that other horse coming through on the inside. And that kind of lessens the performance in my own mind, and Life is Good, trying to evaluate him, obviously, with regards to his, showdown with Flightline. I think the jock felt maybe he had to do that to win, which means he probably felt the horse was weakening. And in a race that was lacking in closers, maybe he didn't have as much left in the tank as maybe he looked like. I don't know. That's just, it's
13:29 to last eighth. That doesn't lie. I know Saratoga, we're going to get into timing systems. Do you believe it was 13:29 to last eighth? We can get into all that. But if the fractions are correct in the way the race looked, he was getting tired at the end, and he was trying to shake him up to close the door on Happy Saver. And so if the postscript of this race is, we can talk about the ride, we can talk about the great year that Life is Good has had. But if the real question is Breeders' Cup Classic at 1.25 miles, what did you think of the last 220 yards of this race? I don't see a horse screaming to me, go send me 1.25 miles. Now, he could completely gut everybody in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and they're all tired and they're all wagging their tongues coming down the lane, and he could outlast and win perhaps. But this to me is not a performance that says, I am in line to bet this horse at 1.25 miles. I'm not there yet.
I'm totally in agreement with you. I will say this, though, that in watching the race and the commitment that Life is Good gave leaving the gate to go to the front, they're not going to change that. And so it sets up a Breeders' Cup Classic, assuming everything falls in the line, whereas it looks like Life is Good will be committed to go to the front that race. And Flightline, who I watch train every week and see him, whenever I go to Del Mar, he's in the first stall in John Sadler's barn. I have a couple of horses there, so I see him every time I go down there. And the point being is, I think they're thinking they don't have to go to the front. If Life is Good is going to commit to go to the front in a race like that, then Flightline will be just as happy to sit second. And you can see him. If you go to xbtv.com, you can see the last gate work that Flightline had. They had him on the gate work because they wanted to start him at the top of the stretch where the Pacific Classic started, so they kind of gave him a practice run. They put a gray horse in there with him and had him lead just to see if Flightline would settle. And he settled beautifully. So I think we're already seeing a strategy and way that race is going to shape up, whereas Life is Good is going to go and Flightline is going to sit second. And the Flightline that I've seen and the Life is Good that I saw last Saturday, I'm not wanting to be Life is Good from the top of the stretch to the wire. I just don't think that's going to happen. Let me ask you this, though. We thought, at least I thought, that it was Life is Good was going to win. We both thought that. But I actually thought Olympiad was going to give him a little bit of a challenge. And he was sitting in a great spot, and then all of a sudden, he just blew up. What do you think happened there?
Maybe it's one of the things where a horse is a little bit over the top. You can't be top of the handicap division in the South like all winter and spring,
Right.
then come through Churchill, and then get to Saratoga perhaps. I mean, what was he, 5 for 5 on the year, now going for 6. These horses aren't machines. They're going to have some regression at some point on a hot day at Saratoga in the summer, different track than he's been winning on earlier in the year. Maybe it's a compound of those events, and it was just time for him to take a step backwards. We'll see with the next race. He's got to come back and run something much better than that to be a serious threat in the Breeders' Cup Classic like we think he might. I don't know if you're talking – if he's off form, right? So It's not like, well, we can't win the Classic with him, so let's go to the dirt mile. I think Olympiad's either going to be on form and pointed for the Classic, or he won't be in the Breeders' Cup. I think that's the story with him, is what happens next. He needs another race, obviously. Or does Bill just say, okay, let's train up to it? But we've seen a lot of these horses in today's game go from Saratoga to the Breeders' Cup without a race in between. This is kind of earlier in the Saratoga meet to do that, but it wouldn't be out of the question, and Bill Mott being a master horseman. That would be major confusion, though, of what kind of horse we get at the Breeders' Cup. If we don't see Olympiad again, and then he just shows up at Keeneland in the Classic entries, it's all about workouts then, and you're going to have to evaluate him off workouts. But you couldn't certainly want him at 1.25 miles off of what we saw on Saturday without something in the interim.
For sure. He trained. I watched him train at Saratoga for this race, and it was a good work, but he wasn't pulling the rider out of the saddle, and I don't know that horse that well to know how he does in the morning, but he left me wanting a little bit more in the morning. I was suspicious that maybe he wasn't quite there, and he was far worse than I thought he would be, but we saw Life is Good train last week, and that's how you're supposed to look. Yeah. And Olympia didn't look that way, so maybe he'll just back off, and I subscribe to your theory, Jeremy. I think he's had a hard year. And you just can't keep going to the well every time, especially against this level of competition. So we'll see if he can, get some freshening, and maybe that'll be that. Happy Saver and Hot Rod Charlie, I think that they are what they are. Yeah. They're good enough to run second, third, but they're not going to beat a top horse anytime soon, I don't think.
No, but you could see them on the ticket in a Breeders' Cup Classic, 3rd or 4th, and
nothing wrong with that.
Their race. You'd love to own them, those kind. They are ATM machines, so they're going to get big checks in big races. Exactly. Let's check our big board for our second topic this week. Brad's lost weekend. It was not a great week for trainer Brad Cox. He had a couple heavy favorites, none heavier than Matt Torreya in the Longines Test Stakes, and at 1-5, she went down to defeat.
Monterrey looks to come on through down at the rail. Monterrey has gained now into second and is going after Hot Peppers as the field heads for home. It is Hot Peppers and Monterrey on the outside. Hot Peppers still in front. Monterrey driving up on the outside with 1/8 of a mile to the finish. It is Hot Peppers and Monterrey, and here is Chi-Town Lady putting in a late run. Chi-Town Lady was last going up the back stretch. She is contending for the lead here with Hot Peppers, and it's Chi-Town Lady. And Saratoga is still indeed the graveyard of favorites.
Yeah. Big favorite goes down there in Matarea. Chi-Town Lady got the pace set up. She rallied for the victory. Jeff, I thought she could run well in this race. I'm not going to lie and say I thought she was the winner, but we talked about it in our Friday handicapping show, First Call, about how when you get races like this that have tremendous speed horses, chances are the late closer is the kind of horse who is the threat on the scene. And Chi-Town Lady was more than just a threat. She ran by and got the big candy. Now Wesley Ward says he's just going to train her up to the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint.
Well, I think she could be tough at Keeneland if it rains. She won her maiden over a drying out or good track at Keeneland. She won that race by 3. She traces. I mean, you can go from More Than Ready to Southern Halo to Turn 2, and that's the greatest off-track breeding I've ever seen. So I had a hunch that when it started to rain and that track got wet right before the race, I thought maybe Jeremy might be onto something, and obviously your Chi-Town Lady did close. But you hear these excuses all the time from trainers. They didn't like the track. We always, it's only the 1-5 shots when they get beat that they don't like the track. The 30-1 shot never doesn't like the track. That's never an excuse you use. However, I will say this. In this particular case, I watched Monterrey down the backstretch, and she looked like she was laboring. Now, I don't know whether she was laboring because she wasn't gripping the track or she was laboring because, again, maybe another case of a filly not being where she should have been physically or whatever in her training. and she came up. She actually ran down to the level, I think, of the others. I'm fairly confident that she's capable of bouncing back.
She's like the Olympiad in that respect, though, right? I mean, had a strong campaign through like March, April, May, June, and never misfired. And now all of a sudden, a little bit this tiring deep track at Saratoga, even with rain on it, maybe it's just exposing some of these horses who've had really tougher campaigns.
It could be. I'm willing to accept that as a more likely excuse than the track, but we'll see if a little bit of a breather might not help her now, and maybe she can come back. This race was, to me, inconclusive, but I always liked Chi-Town Lady ever since she won her first 2 last year. I thought she was going to be a really good filly as a 2-year-old, and she didn't kind of push on after that, but she's got that grade 1 on her resume now. That's all she really needs to do.
The off-track was not kind at Mountaineer for Brad Cox as well, where Home Brew, a horse we both liked in there, 5-2 in the West Virginia Derby, ran a disappointing 4th behind Skippy Longstocking. And out of California's Del Mar racetrack, it wasn't about a wet track, but it was another disappointing result for the Cox barn as the Clement Hirsch saw She Dares the Devil come up short.
And She Dares the Devil takes the lead. Blue Stripe is coming to make a race of it. She Dares the Devil, Blue Stripe. Desert Dawn has come from behind to be in 3rd. At the top of the lane, and Blue Stripe looking for the upset gets the lead. She Dares the Devil at the rail. Desert Dawn plugging away from 3rd. Homeward bound in the Clement Hirsch, and it's Blue Stripe in full flight for the wire. Blue Stripe in front by 2.5 with a 16th to go, and Blue Stripe and Hector Berrio have won the Grade 1 Clemental Hirsch. Close then for second. Desert Dawn just touched She Dares the Devil, then Susay and Private Mission.
Well, Jeff, it was, not the result you expected to see from the defending champ in that She Dares the Devil. The one thing good for her is that the Breeders' Cup Distaff will be back at Keeneland. The Spinster will be at Keeneland, and she runs well there. So She Dares the Devil maybe gets back on the beam, but that's not the kind of performance you expected to see from her. She looked to have the race, well within her grasp at the quarter pole and just didn't have the punch.
No, and she won this race last year on this track, and she had a great trip. I mean, she's outside the pace and looked like not a stronger way. The pace wasn't particularly fast. 46.4, 111.2. That's normal. I mean, average for these. She had her chance, but Blue Stripe's good. I mean, we talk about She Dares the Devil. Now she's won 10 out of 21 lifetime, so a very admirable record even in defeat there. But Blue Stripe, coming up from South America, she's only had 10 starts with 6 wins, so she's maybe a little bit better mare than you've given credit for. She also won the Santa Margarita earlier this year, was beaten just 3/4 of a length by Private Mission in the Santa Maria. And then that filly here ran dead last. Private Mission didn't show up. She made the pace and stop. I like Desert Dawn, the 3-year-old. She did everything I asked her to do, and that is to say finish ahead of She Dares the Devil, but she just couldn't beat Blue Stripe. So decent sort of race there. I would imagine that these top three fillies will meet again, maybe in Kentucky.
As deep as the Distaff division is, it seems like Clairiere is the only one moving ascending right now.
Right.
Latruska may have run some of her best races and will have to get back on the beam. Malathot, the same. What we saw with She Dares the Devil here, starting to look like Clairiere. And I would have never said this a month and a half ago. Clairiere could be the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Distaff. She's really the one who is ascending. And now we talked about Brad Cox having a tough weekend. It's all perspective, right? I mean, Brad Cox last week won 8 races, second most of anybody in the nation. Jamie Ness won 12. So Brad won 8 for 28, won 29%. That's the second best week of anybody in the country. But he lost 3 big ones here that people didn't expect his horses to run as off as they were. We probably don't expect that to continue. I don't expect to see any kind of dry run for the Brad Cox barn at the upper levels. He'll probably get right back at it this weekend, knocking out graded stakes. And he did win a graded stakes on the undercard, I believe, on the Mountaineer card on West Virginia Derby Day. So we shed no tears for Brad Cox for having an off week. He will definitely be back in business. To topic 3 we go, and it's not your father's Buick. As a proud driver of my second Buick Enclave, Jeff, I don't know if this is an attack on my driving or this guy here, William Buick, the rider who came into New York and swept both the Saratoga Invitational Derby and the Saratoga Invitational Oaks. Your thought on William Buick's big week?
good rider. I mean, we knew that anyway, but I mean, he's a European riders. They ride at a different track like every other day, and they are all different types: left hand, right hand, straight away, up a hill, down a hill, and you really have to be a very skilled rider. And then he goes to Saratoga. It's a plain old flat left-handed track. It's like a piece of cake for him, and he put on a show and so did obviously Charles Appleby, and even though Nation's Pride and With the Moonlight disappointed us somewhat, they both ran well. But I mean, in their first start since coming over from the States at Belmont Park, both of them rose to the occasion. They both look good. And the funny thing is, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but there are better. He has better ones out there, but these are good enough to beat our best. And both winners were impressive.
Let's go back to the Saratoga Invitational Derby on Saturday. Nation's Pride with William Buick up.
As the field comes off the turn and enters the stretch. And it is Classic Causeway. And on the outside, Nation's Pride, who is all out. Annapolis is now kicking in as they come down for the 8th pole. Here is Nation's Pride up to take the lead from Classic Causeway. Annapolis is third. They're coming on for the finish, and it will be the Irish bred Nation's Pride to win the $1 million Grade 1 Caesars Saratoga Derby.
And Jeff, I'll give the public this. They don't get fooled twice too often. After the win on Saturday for Appleby and for Buick, they weren't about to let the Sunday filly go off at any price. With the Moonlight, had no business being the favorite over McCulloch based on their previous effort, but the public got it right. They played the hot hand, and With the Moonlight delivered. Let's go back and take a look at that, and we'll get your opinion.
Contemporary Art and With the Moonlight, they are right together coming into the stretch. It is Contemporary Art. Out in the middle of the course there is With the Moonlight. With the Moonlight, Contemporary Art, then McCulloch, and New Year's Eve. With the Moonlight in front here in deep stretch, and it will be With the Moonlight and William Buick to take the Grade 3 Saratoga Oaks.
Your thoughts on those performances?
Well, you mentioned the favorites role. I was a little disappointed With the Moonlight's effort on the Belmont Oaks, but last week she worked with Nation's Pride. We had it on XBTV, and With the Moonlight sat behind him and just blew him away. And I think the word got out. You know that horse that just won yesterday?
Yeah, right.
This filly just blew him away in the workout. If you watch the works, you'd come away saying, I'm not throwing her out. That's for sure. Right. Based on what I saw yesterday. But I admit, I thought it would be much closer in the wagering, but With the Moonlight got hammered and won very convincingly, and actually got the same kind of trip in the race, sitting second outside the leader as she did in the workout. And she's a pretty good filly for sure. Now, it was interesting because after the race was over, William Buick was interviewed coming off the track. I guess it might have been Maggie who did it on TV, and what he said was, she said, she didn't run well in the Oaks, the Epsom Oaks. She got beat 26 lengths, finished 11th and last. And Buick said, she just didn't stay the mile and a half. She's a miler, basically, middle distance horse. Mile and 3/16 is middle distance for them. So he had an explanation as to why she didn't run well in her previous race. Certainly there was nothing wrong with her race in the Belmont Oaks, but backing up even more, from a mile and a half to a mile and a quarter, a mile and 3/16, and with the trip that she got, With the Moonlight, a daughter of Frankel, certainly ran well, and I would think that she'd be a candidate to come back for the Breeders' Cup Filly Ameriturf.
Yeah, Filly Ameriturf for her. As for the boys, we don't see the 3-year-olds really excel in the Breeders' Cup Turf, stretching out to a mile and a half. So, we'll have to see whether the Colt will come back and, Nation's Pride and be a Breeders' Cup Turf kind of horse. Certainly Europe's got plenty of other big hands to bring. A little bit about William Buick. He's 34 years old from Oslo, Norway. I tried to find out who were the top athletes ever to come out of Norway. I'd like to tell you one of them, but like all 10 on the list, I can't pronounce any of the names. I mean, they're
There's
just
got to be
like,
a hockey player on there somewhere, right?
well, it's usually like people in the biathlon that like shoot
Yeah.
guns and snow ski at the same time, and athletes like that. But one of the top athletes out of Norway, he's won 3 Breeders' Cup races last year alone. He won the race
Right.
with Modern Games that counted for him as a victory, not on the tote, of course, as we know, but 3 wins last year for William Buick. He's certainly riding high as he comes into this year's Breeders' Cup off these 2 wins. And the other interesting thing about Buick is I've got him for 12 mounts in the United States lifetime. He's 6 for 12. Or no, 6 for, I correct this. He's had 31 mounts in the U.S. He's 6 for 12 with Charlie Appleby, and he's 0 for 19 riding for everybody else. So the point for William Buick is come ride for Appleby and everybody else. Just tell them that you're a little busy.
Right. Yep.
Topic 4 this week is time after time. And we hinted about this at the top of the show, Jeff, that the timing systems have been less than stellar, to be polite about it. Whether we're talking about the beam teletimers, the GPS, GMAX tracking, Trackist, there's been a lot of errors in clocking races. And it's fundamental to any handicapper. I'm not a speed figure devotee. So it doesn't matter to me and how it makes the figures, but to a figure person, it absolutely is a big deal. But I am a pace and closing time and things like that handicapper. And like I mentioned earlier, I want to hold the 13:29 final 1/8 of a mile against Life is Good in the Whitney as I project out to 1.25 miles. But I can't trust the 13:29 clocking. And as we see clocking problems all around the country, it really is a combustible situation that influences handicappers of all types.
I can't understand why the racetracks, and this is not unique to NYRA, and I'll talk about NYRA real quick. Last weekend, of course, you had a situation where with the Moonlights race, I'm sorry, it was the Colts race, yeah.
Nation's Pride.
That race didn't have any fractions at all. No final time. You look at the Equibase charts, you're not going to find any fractions or any final time there. The next day, Goodnight Olive, a very, very good filly. That timing, we don't know what she went because first quarter was in 26, which means the timing didn't start accurately. Another Equibase chart, if you look it up, you're not going to find any fractions or final time. We don't know how fast she ran, which is fundamental in trying to figure out whether she can win on the race or not. We want to be able to use numbers or whatever you want to use. Even if you didn't use numbers, you want to know what the fractions are.
Right.
This is, Jeremy, this happens every day at almost, like, not every track, but quite a few tracks. Every track, West Coast, East Coast, doesn't matter. You can't trust the clocking. I remember back about 25 years ago, maybe it was 30, I don't know, whatever it was. At that time, I remember Del Mar used to hire an outside company to a real nickel and dime outfit. We'll call it that, and to time these things. And this person had been doing it for a few years, and we, the boys in the press box had a drawing to try to pick like a draft. We were going to draft, and whoever can come closest to the first race in the meeting that the timing mechanism would mess up, we'd buy him his dinner,
Right.
And so that's what we would do because it was such a laughing thing. And of course, whoever got the first one would always pick the same race, the first race on the first day, because that's the most likely time to mess it up. And finally, the California Horse Racing Board got so many complaints that they actually fined not only this company but the track itself, Del Mar Thoroughbred Club, and said, we're going to keep fining you until you fix this thing. And they finally fixed this thing. And I wonder whether the tracks, if you made it financially feasible to make sure that you've got this thing fixed, or else you're going to lose some money, maybe they would put more work into it. Because right now, the evidence suggests that, well, they are aware of the problem and they want to fix it. They're not doing everything that's necessary. And I'm looking at you, NYRA, and I'm looking at other tracks as well. So maybe the governing board in each state has to step up and make sure that these tracks know that if they don't fix this thing and are consistently accurate it's going to cost them. Maybe that'll move them or maybe not. I don't know. But I can tell you this, when I was a really serious professional gambler back in the 80s, and I found a track that I didn't trust the clocking, I didn't play the track.
Yeah.
It cost them money. I wouldn't wager. And I'm just one of several people at the time that were putting it in pretty good that just stayed away, so that we can have an impact too, the horse player. And I just hope that somebody makes the tracks realize how important it is. And if it has to be a financial penalty, then make it strong.
Yeah, and you wonder where that governance comes from, right? I mean, HISA, the new governing body, is going to be more on the regulation side for the horses and the medications and the safety protocols and things like that. But the betting safety protocols, I mean, there's been the Thoroughbred Protective Agency, a bureau over the years that look into, inconsistencies in wagering patterns and things like that to see, make sure that there's scandals in the race fixing and things like that. One of those bodies has to consider time to be as important as medication, as wagering dollars and things like that, because a lack of confidence in the timing systems will create a lack of confidence in going to the wagering windows. So it's an absolute problem that needs to be addressed. I don't know who goes to fix it, Jeff, but it's not a tongue-in-cheek discussion, but we had a little bit of fun. We're trying to figure out maybe who could fix this problem, because we don't have the answers right off the top of our head. You came up with two. You said that Cyndi Lauper, who famed herself for time after time, maybe they could follow her lead on this. And you went back even about the same era, maybe even a couple years sooner, with Morris Day in the time from Prince and Purple Rain. So, if Cyndi Lauper and Morris Day can do anything at all to help horse players out here, we're certainly calling upon them.
Well, they both had great songs in the 80s. With
and we
time
said we were going musical today.
Well, yeah, Morris Day in the time. But that might have been the last time in the 80s that we had clocks that worked. I don't know. It seems like it's been 35 years since we've had consistently good clockings. I know one thing. Again, when I was a serious, hardcore professional gambler in the 80s with horse racing, and that's all I played. I didn't play anything else. It was just horses. I was a devout Andy Beyer speed figure kind of guy. And this, by the way, was before the Beyer numbers were actually printed in the DRF. So I had what I thought was a pretty good edge because I was using the Beyer numbers. But if I tell you what, if I had fractions and final times that didn't mesh, it would have drove me nuts. But I never remember having any problem. We were all using the same, beam system, and it always seemed to work. I never had to worry about whether a clocking was accurate or not. Now it's like I can't trust any of them.
You got me thinking, though. I mean, Morris Day, I can't get it out of my mind now. You know how, like, in Purple Rain, he walked around with a mirror and he was checking himself in the mirror? In the 80s, when you were a professional gambler, did you check yourself out in the mirror?
No, there wasn't much to look at then or now.
I don't know, Siegel. I can see you like that in that jacket with the little pencil thin tie and walking around with a mirror around your sprawling estate there in Southern California.
Wasn't his famous song Jungle Love?
It was.
Yeah, okay.
It was, absolutely.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
All right, let's get away from Cyndi Lauper and Morris Day and go to our fifth topic, the stars of tomorrow, because we talked about yesteryear far too much on that segment. So let's look ahead, if you will. Our stars of tomorrow segment looks at 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds who are fresh on the scene and big maiden breakers. We had one at Saratoga over the past weekend on the Whitney undercard for Steve Asmussen. Let's take a look at Disarm.
Ride as they come through the stretch. And it is Disarm in front with a 16th to the finish. Disarm now drawing away from the field. And Disarm gets his maiden breaker impressively here at Saratoga, won by better than a half dozen lengths.
2-year-old colt by Gun Runner. Steve Asmussen was 0 for 9 at the meet with 2-year-olds. So this one won when the barn wasn't going so great with the 2-year-olds. That's usually a good sign. Jeff, your thoughts on Disarm?
One of the reasons why I like him is because, apart from the fact that he's by Gun Runner, he did it going 7/8 of a mile, and he was lengthening out at the end. You see a lot of really fast 2-year-olds this time of the year, but you always have to scratch your head and say, okay, he's fast. How far does he really want to go? Can he go 6? Can he go 6.5? Maybe 7? Never going to go 2 turns. But Disarm, bred as he is, winning as he did. Now, there's a colt that you can envision getting nothing but better around 2 turns. This was just his second start. His Byron number improved. This is what you want to see. From 66 to 86, 20-point leap. He did that going from 5.5 to 7. That was part of it as well. And now Steve can think about, okay, I can't wait to try this horse around 2 turns, or at least a mile and 16th, even if it's in New York around 1 turn. But Disarm to me looks like a colt. Again, another one of those gun runners. And I don't know if he's brilliantly great or anything like that, but I'm darn near sure that he's going to do a whole lot better longer than shorter. And I see nothing but blue sky for Disarm. He's going to be a good colt.
We're already 3 weeks into the Saratoga meet, so coming back in the hopeful, maybe not, but you've got the Iroquois at Churchill during that September meet, and then you've the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland, as the local prep for the Breeders' Cup in October there.
Right.
So timing-wise, Steve's going to support those races with a couple horses anyway, maybe Disarm, one to watch for those two. That's going to wrap up our 5 topics this week. We got Disarm as our star of tomorrow. Time now for our bonus topic each week. Well, Jeff, we're throwing this one in because Saturday at Churchill Downs, they're going to run the Arlington Million, and it just seems out of place. Of course, Churchill Downs shuttered Arlington Park last summer. No more racing there. The Arlington Million was canceled last year because it was only worth $500,000, so they called it the Mr. D. So now the Arlington Million's back, 2 years removed from its last edition. Rams to wrap up his career. Johnny Unitas went west to San Diego and was a quarterback for the Chargers. Pete Rose went north of the border to swing the bat for the Montreal Expos. And Akeem Olajuwon, I even had to like double check this when I saw a list of great players who ended their careers in weird places. And I forgot that Akeem played 60 games with the Raptors at the end of his career after being a lifelong Houston Rocket. This to me is the feel of an Arlington Million at Churchill Downs. It's like Pete Rose wearing the Montreal Expos batting helmet. It's just not right.
It isn't. And in fact, I had even forgotten that they were going to run it this week. I was looking at some of the stakes races for next weekend, and the Arlington Millions this week and the Beverly D. I had forgotten about it. Out of sight, out of mind. And they're going to run it at Churchill. It's just not the same, Jeremy. I don't care who shows up in that race. I think they've already drawn it. I don't.
Field of 9 for the Arlington Million. It's mostly the Kentucky type. Santon is back after winning the big race on Derby Day. You'll get Smooth Like Straight because the Arlington Million is reduced to 1 1/8 over the turf course at Churchill, not the 1 1/4 that it's been historically. Right. So at 1 1/8, you kind of can pull some of the milers in there. They got Smooth Like Straight into the race. Of course, there's the Grade 1 mile, the 4-star Dave this weekend at Saratoga already. So as you try to draw in off the milers and the 1/16 horses, you also have that race to compete for runners. So they got 9 in the Arlington Million, 5 in the Beverly D in a small field there. And the Churchill turf course has not taken its roots, the grass that they planted last year, to the extent that they're happy enough with it that they could run all 4 turf stakes that they thought they would run this weekend. They're only going to run 2 of the turf stakes, and the Beverly D is going to run early in the card with a temporary rail, and then they'll be on the hedge later in the day with the temporary rail down for the Arlington Million. So, it's going to be interesting. They're up against Saratoga and Del Mar when it comes to handle. We're going to have what looks to be, a potentially big jackpot pick 6 day at Gulfstream Park. So there's going to be a lot going on Saturday that's going to take away from Arlington Million Day. It's going to be weird. It's going to be Hakeem for the Raptors.
I think they should have just left it alone myself. I mean, I don't have any great. I mean, the Arlington Million used to be a great international race, Beverly D as well, and it's not the same.
It's the TV race that really got me into racing. The first Arlington Million on NBC, I still remember it. Jay Randolph was the play-by-play announcer. Pete Axthelm was the handicapper on the show. And that $1 million race, holy cow. And I was like 10 years old when they ran the first Arlington Million. And that's what really got me national racing, right? I mean, you went to your local track back then, but you didn't know, other than the Kentucky Derby, you didn't see national races on TV. And so the Arlington Million has a really special place for a lot of people. And boy, you talk to any Chicagoan and they're not feeling the vibe of the Arlington Million somewhere away from Chicago as well. But even somebody of my age, 50 years old, and when the Arlington Million started, being a young kid watching that, wide-eyed on NBC, it's a race of my childhood and my youth, and I just can't wrap my arms around it being at Churchill Downs this Saturday. But a lot of great people work at Churchill Downs. Some of my absolute best friends in racing work there. So for their sake, I hope they put on a great show and enjoy the racing day. But the Arlington Million in Louisville is just a little bit off kilter for me.
Yeah, I'll watch it. I'll watch it. I don't know who's in it yet, but I'll watch it.
Plenty of time to handicap. It's only Tuesday each week we do It's Official, and we'll now wrap up this week's show as we look ahead to our Friday handicapping podcast. First call, Jeff and I will be back with you on Friday to look at the Arlington Million and some of the other stakes races around the country. Big stakes day for sure coming up there at Saratoga and Del Mar, again with a couple graded stakes on Saturday and graded stakes on Sunday as well. So on behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, that'll wrap it up this week, and my partner Jeff Siegel, it's now official because Jeff Siegel said so. We'll talk to you next week.